Hello, and welcome again to Module 11. This is the final part of the three-part video on evaluation and reflection. My name is Lanang, and this video is one of the series on lesson planning. In Module 11, we are going to look back at our lesson planning. Specifically, we reflect on the three stages of lesson planning. Then, we identify the strengths and weaknesses of a lesson plan. Next, we'll look at different ways to do self and peer evaluation checklists on lesson planning. And finally, with all the input, we hope you can make revision to your lesson plan. Module 11 has three parts. So, in the first part, we've already looked at the areas we need to evaluate and reflect upon. We've identified different areas to reflect upon in two stages of planning and teaching. In planning stage, we need to clearly see that the objectives are the most important area to reflect upon. We need to check the objectives against students' profile, teaching points, shape of the lesson, and procedure. And in teaching stage, the students become the most important factor. All we need to reflect starts from the students. In the second part, we identified the tools like checklists and observation that help us reflect. We looked at 4 tools for reflection. They are teacher's notes or commands, checklist, classroom observation forms, and mental thoughts. We also discussed the pros and cons of each tool. And while mental thoughts are not recommended, the other 3 tools can be used interchangeably according to your specific context. And finally, in part 3 today, we are going to practice on how to reflect on several lesson plans and a taught lesson and see how we can improve in the future. By the end of Part 3, Module 11, you'll be able to reflect on strengths and weaknesses of a sample lesson plan, to reflect on the backup activities for a taught lesson plan, and to reflect on your own lesson plan and its taught lesson. This is a lesson from the textbook Tiếng Anh 3. It targets Vietnamese grade 3 students who are truly beginners of English. And this is a lesson plan for a 35-minute lesson to a class of true beginners of English. Now, let's analyze the strengths and weaknesses of this lesson plan in the following areas. First, teaching points. Second, shape of the lesson. Third, objectives. And finally, procedure. Now, let's reflect on the teaching points. In pre-listening activity, the new words are taught. In the activities, point and say, and the activity let's talk, students are supposed to practice the sentence patterns. then we can say that the teaching points are tactile upon. However, although the teaching points are included in the lesson plan, they are not clearly presented and thoroughly practiced. Regarding the shape of the lesson, it is rather tricky here, because the name of the activity is listen. Some may think that this is a listening lesson, therefore uses pre, while, post stages. However, with the written text available for students, there is not a meaningful reason for students to listen and identify the names of pupils in the picture. Therefore, the pre-while-post shape is not very appropriate. A more suitable shape is PPP, like this. The verbs listen, identify, ask, and answer are all action verbs. Therefore, they can be observable. However, as can be seen from the lesson plan, students are to listen to identify the names while the names are already in the picture. Thus, it doesn't involve the use of any skills that improve listening comprehension. Similarly, at the surface, the speaking objectives seem to focus on communication. But, as noted here, reading out aloud or oral repetition do not guarantee comprehension nor communication. Now, let's analyze the procedure. The lesson follows pre, while, post stages with a warm-up and a consolidation song. Students are guided in reading aloud from whole groups to pairs for several times, and after practicing speaking in pairs, students role-play and perform the dialogue at the front as a mini-assessment. Clearly, the lesson has an introduction, a middle, and an end. Regarding the balance of the skills, students practice listening, reading, and speaking. Reading aloud is practiced the most. However, the activities in the procedure don't help students achieve the objectives as analyzed earlier. Now it's your turn to make revision to this lesson plan. Write your reflection at the end of your adapted lesson plan, and it is the assignment for you. As you plan your lesson, you are to think of the things that could possibly happen as you teach it that would require some sort of adjustment. Write your ideas for those adjustments in the backup plan section of your lesson plan. Then, if you have to make changes, you will be ready. What will you do when the while listening practice activity is unexpectedly difficult for your students? The backup plan could be play pauses after small chunks, use simplified version of the dialogue. What will you do when the point and say activity is unexpectedly easy for your students? They find it boring, but you still want to check their ability just to make sure. Have students quickly point to the name for their partners to say whole sentence. Do actions with names. Now it's your turn. Imagine you are teaching the lesson using the lesson plan. What will you reflect and react? Reflect on one of the lessons you were taught on the following areas using the checklist. About the lesson itself. Did you set the lesson goals at the start of the class? Which activity or which part of the lesson was particularly well? Which activity or which part of the lesson did not work so well? Which activity of the lesson was particularly difficult for you? Which activity of the lesson was rather easy for you? Did you manage to keep all of the students engaged? Did you practice reading, writing, listening and speaking? Which did you practice more? Did you confirm the lesson goals at the end of the lesson? Did your students successfully achieve the goals? Did you assign homework at the end of the lesson? Why or why not? Were any of the activities too easy for your students? Were any of the activities too difficult? Which activities did they enjoy the most? Were there any problems regarding behavior? If so, which? How did you deal with them? How can these types of problems be avoided in the future? Did all of the students participate actively? If there were any who did not participate, what aspects of the lesson do you think failed to engage them? Did all of the students meet the lesson goal? Can you pinpoint specific problems that some students had during the lesson? How hard was it to plan this lesson? What made it easy or hard to plan? Were you able to follow your lesson plan? Do you have to make any unplanned changes? Did you discard it completely? How useful was the lesson plan? What changes would you make to your lesson plan for the next time you teach this lesson? What activities would you add or take out? How hard was it to gather the materials you needed? What made it easy or difficult or time-consuming to find the right worksheets, the videos, the games, toys, realia, etc.? How useful was the material you planned to use? Did you use all of the material? If not, why did you choose not to use it? Would you use the same materials next time? What would you change? So, in Part 3 Module 11, we will look at how to reflect on strengths and weaknesses of a sample lesson plan. You've also got a chance to reflect on your lesson. Now we come to an end of Module 11. Goodbye!